Snow fell as lightly as breath, drifting through the narrow streets of the old city. Roofs wore soft white caps, and the chimneys spoke in pale ribbons of smoke that curled into the deep winter sky. Lamps on iron posts trembled in their glass cages, casting halos on the cobbles below. Now and then a carriage wheel rolled past with the muffled hush of cloth on stone, and voices warmed the air before dissolving into the quiet. On this last night of the year, the city seemed to hold itself still, as if listening for the first notes of midnight. Windows glowed from within, amber squares where candles quivered, where hands set bread upon tables, where families leaned in, faces bright, as if they could light the room themselves. Through thin curtains and frosted panes, a life of warmth unfolded, one that hummed like a lullaby carried by the walls. Along the far end of a lane, where the stones were older and the gutters curved like shallow streams, a small figure walked with careful steps. She wore a faded dress mended by many hands in many threads. Her coat was too thin to answer the sharp night, and her feet, once snug in shoes that did not fit, were bare now, red with cold, pale with snow. In her mittenless hands, she held a bundle of matches wrapped together with a length of cotton string. The matches were orderly, patient things, their heads banded with promise, their bodies light as whispers. She had spoken a few times that evening, lifting her chin and trying to make her voice sound hopeful. Matches, she had said softly, as if a louder word would shatter the night. Good matches for the hearth, for the candle. Most passers-by were in a hurry to get home, tucking their chins against the cold, a loaf under one arm, a child's hand in the other. They did not mean to be unkind. They meant to arrive, to gather, to be on the other side of the window with the puff of steam rising from their cups and the comfort of familiar voices. The girl did not begrudge them. It felt like watching a play from the side curtain, gentle and far away. She loved the way the snow made a soft sound when it landed on a woolen sleeve. She loved the hushed world of street corners, the hush that came when bells in a distant tower were rung by a careful hand. She loved the sight of candles set like small suns around a room, their flames leaning toward one another as if in conversation. Her fingers ached, and she drew the bundle of matches close to her chest for the comfort of touching something neat, something hers. A shop window showed her reflection as a pale pencil sketch, wavering between panes of glass that held a display of oranges and sugared nuts and a tin toy soldier standing at attention. She raised a hand in greeting to the girl in the window, and the girl raised her hand back. They wished each other a good night in silence. At the edge of a courtyard where two houses met at a corner made by time, there was a little alcove sheltered from the wind. The stone there was older still, etched with faint patterns of leaves and stars, a mason's signature from a century that had learned patience. The girl stepped into that quiet space, and the wind, respectful as always in old places, lessened its grip. Above her, the sky was a dark blue cloth with needle-pricked stars, and somewhere beyond the roofs a bell chimed the half-hour, as if to say, not yet, but soon. She did not count the coins not in her pocket, nor the loaves not in her hands. She counted instead the matches, 1, 2, 3, many thin slivers of light awaiting the smallest invitation. The night had the look of a kindly teacher. It asked nothing. It required only that one breathe, slowly, and listen. She sat on the step and watched her breath turn into little clouds. She watched them float away, one after another. If she had been someone else on this night, if she had been the woman who hurried past with a basket of pears, or the boy who pressed his nose against glass at the toy shop, she might have been inside now. But she was exactly who she was, and the snow still fell in the same tender way, and the lamps still trembled in their cages of glass, and the stars were in no rush to go anywhere at all. So she waited, and the city, warm at the windows and quiet under the eaves, waited with her. Chapter 2. Streets of Light and Shadow. The girl rose and walked the length of the lane, the bundle of matches held like a little book she was learning to read. She passed a baker's door from which warmth seeped in a shy exhale, and she paused to let her cheek bask in that borrowed breath. The smell of bread made her think of mornings when time still had soft corners, and a certain laugh, the one that could be heard even when it tried to hide, filled the small kitchen like sunshine. She did not name that laugh because it hurt to do so. Instead, she tucked the sound back into the place where treasured things are kept. Matches, she murmured, more out of habit than hope. In a window cut low into a brick wall, a seamstress bent over a dress like a quiet prayer. A candle took its time beside her, burning evenly, if a little shorter than it had in the beginning. Closer to the square, where the stones of the street widened and grew more confident, a fiddler drew a sweet tune from strings that shone brown as chestnuts. Couples laughed as they hurried by, their scarves waving small goodbyes to the air. Once, early in the evening, a man with warm wool at his neck and a kind, distracted look had stopped. He had listened to her small voice, and his smile had asked forgiveness of the night for his lateness. Another time, he said, and it was not a cruel thing to say, only the truth he had with him. He pressed a coin into her hand, and she held it for a moment, feeling the weight of metal and the warmth of his glove. And then a cartwheel splashed through a shallow puddle, and the coin slipped from her fingers and disappeared among the soaked leaves near the gutter. She looked for it for a long time, as if looking were its own small warmth, and when she could not find it, she forgave the coin for being lost. Some things were good at that. Now night deepened. The city shut its doors one by one with the polite firmness of someone tucking in a child. In the house with ironwork at the balcony, a violin rose and fell, a lullaby for people and walls alike. In the narrowest alley, a cat made its rounds with light feet and comfortable certainty. In the square, the fountain wore a collar of ice, the water hush-hushing beneath as if speaking under a blanket. The girl's feet were numb, and when she wiggled her toes, the sensation returned like a shiver doing a slow dance. Her hands knew the shape of the matches as well as they knew the shape of prayer. A familiar sliding of wood against wood, the promise of sulfur in the air. If only one match, she thought, only to see the flame. Not to sell, not to loss or gain, but simply to witness a small summer in the palm. She returned to the alcove where the wind had agreed to do less harm, and there she arranged her bundle as if tucking a child into bed. The bells murmured a quarter hour more. This, too, was a kindness. The night measured itself in gentle portions, so that no one had to face it all at once. Matches, she whispered to the wall, and the wall, old and dignified, listened with all the seriousness of stone. Chapter 3. The First Flame. She chose a match that looked brave. She nipped it free from the string and held it in her right hand, cupping her left around it to make a small room where wind and flame could come to an understanding. The scratch against brick made a tiny sound, like a cricket waking from a dream. Then light. It was the kind of light that grows from within itself, patient and certain. It caught the wood and rode up the small staircase of grain and fibre, becoming in a breath the smallest of fires. Its heart was blue, its body golden, and the halo it cast painted the stone with honey. Heat came next, more surprising somehow than the light. It did not claw at her fingers or shout its presence. It simply unfurled, a quiet hand pressed to a cold cheek. She drew the flame closer, and the warmth was a story told in the language of skin. She sighed, and in her sigh there was the deepest part of joy. Gratitude for small things faithfully themselves. The stone near her feet melted into another place as the light deepened. At first she thought it was a trick the fire played on shadows. This rounding of edges, this glowing curve. But as she watched, the vision resolved like breath clearing on glass. Before her stood a little iron stove, stout and beloved, with a door that latched with a tidy click and a belly full of good burning wood. The stove had a personality, as the best stoves do. It seemed to sit there with its legs set and its shoulders squared, ready to work hard and kindly. The fire inside it was a generous thing. It murmured in a voice that knew every board in the room, every knot in the wood. It smelled of pine and a memory of resin, and when she held out her hands, her fingers began to feel like fingers again. She turned her palms to and fro, letting heat stitch itself into the cold places. The room around the stove came into being, as if a painter with a soft brush had laid deeper color on the canvas. A rug braided from scraps of old dresses. A chair with one arm smoothed by 1,000 leans. A little shelf where a single cup and saucer rested like an old married couple. She did not move for fear of startling it all away. She let the stove talk to her the way stoves talk, in little waves, in small collapsing towers of coal, in breaths that sound like yes, yes, yes. If she had a crumb, she would have toasted it. If she had a hand to hold, she would have warmed it there too. As it was, she held the fire in her eyes, and the warmth found her from the inside out. The flame in her fingers burned down, and she knew it the way one knows that a lullaby is nearing its last notes. The stove brightened, grateful to have been seen, and then every line of it softened, loosened, let go. The room became stone again. Her hands were her hands, cold and small. The alley was an alley. Above, the sky was a deeper, older blue than before. She did not cry. She blamed nothing and no one. She let the quiet settle again and listened to her own breath. Matches, she thought, were a way to say thank you to the dark without asking it to leave. Chapter 4. The Tree of Stars. Her fingers had learned the motion now, the tender divorce of one match from the bundle, the cupping of hands to make a harbor, the quick whisper of wood on stone. Once more, light. Once more, the gentle bloom of heat. This flame was sprightly, as if it had been practiced in celebration. It flickered with little jumps that made her smile without thinking. The wall opposite her seemed to pull back a fraction, and where cold stone had been, a room unfolded like a flower opening to the morning. In the middle of the room stood a tree, taller than any she had ever seen, straight as a bell's rope, and as proud. It was dressed not with haste, but with care. Apples shone like secrets not meant to be kept. Small ginger biscuits swung on ribbons, their edges scalloped as if the baker had traced the curve of a child's laugh in dough. Strings of popcorn climbed the branches like mountain paths. Best of all were the candles, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, each with a tiny flame that knew its place and kept it with patient joy. The sight of all that gentle radiance made a warmth that felt different from the stoves. It was like standing under a sky where every star had decided to come closer for just one night. The girl did not count the candles. She watched how they spoke to one another across the boughs, how a flame here bowed slightly and a flame there nodded back. The shadows on the ceiling performed a slow ballet, the kind that did not demand applause. If she listened, and she always listened, there was music. Not from an instrument she could name, but from the room itself, a low song woven of pine and beeswax and memory. She stepped a little nearer, if stepping was even what her body did. Perhaps it was only her attention floating forward like a moth. On one high branch, where the green was darkest, a star made of tin trembled in the warm air. It was not grand, not a jeweled thing, but it had been polished with love until it held the room inside it twice. The flame between her fingers shortened, gently, dutifully. The light on the tree did not mind. It continued to be a world unto itself, even as the girl's small sun sank. And then something happened that felt like a secret being shared. As her match dwindled to a last glow, one of the candle flames on the tree lifted as a firefly might in summer, except that it lifted not out, but up. Another followed, and another at their own unhurried pace, as if someone had opened a door in the ceiling that led to the night. The little lights rose, and as they rose, they changed. The room's ceiling became the sky, and the sky received them as a mother receives her child. They settled into places they seemed to remember, and the night above the city became richer by a handful of new stars. The girl watched, her mouth a small O of wonder, and felt that there was a great kindness at work in the world, quiet and unadvertised. The match sighed itself away. The room with the tree folded itself with exquisite care and put itself back on a shelf in the air. The alley returned, the stone remembered its edges, the wind, oh so gentle here, tested the corner and thought better of it. The girl looked up and found that the stars overhead had indeed multiplied, or perhaps she had multiplied her capacity to see them. Either way, the sky was not in want. Chapter 5. The Gentle Hand. She took another match, and this time her hands were steady not from warmth, but from the certainty that something good was about to arrive. The scratch and bloom were as before. The light stepped into the little room of her cupped palms with the ease of a friend. The world that came forth was not a room made of furniture or a tree made of green, but a presence made of light. It did not glare or demand. It simply appeared and allowed itself to be recognized. And she did recognize it. I think she had been recognizing it in small ways all her life. In the way dawn undoes the night without apology. In the way a certain laugh can find a crack in sorrow and widen it to a door. Her grandmother stood in that light. Not the grandmother as she had been in her last days, when bones show their impatient angles and hands fret for things to put in order, but the grandmother as the girl's heart had kept her. The very shape of comfort. Her hair was snow-threaded with sun. Her eyes were the color of the spaces in the sky, where birds rest as they fly. Her face had the lines a river makes in its banks after many seasons of faithful traveling. "My little one," said her grandmother, not with mouth and tongue, perhaps, but with the whole of herself. The words arrived at the girl as warmth arrives at fingers, not argued, but received. The girl made a sound that had been waiting a long while in her chest, and the sound was both hello and home. She reached out, and the grandmother reached also, and their hands met at the point where light becomes touch. The city, which had been watching with dignified interest, turned its gaze away to give them privacy. The snow, which had been decorating hats and doorsteps, slowed its falling to listen more closely. The bells in the tower folded their tongues and kept still, trusting that the proper hour would not need telling. "Are you cold?" her grandmother asked, as one asks because love has its rituals. "Not now," said the girl, and it was true, and it was more than true. The warmth that flowed through their joined hands was not a temperature so much as a remembering. You belong, you are wanted, you are seen. They spoke without urgency. The grandmother told her that some rooms exist only to be visited in times such as this, and that candles learn from stars how to be brave, and that stoves know more about steadfastness than many people do. The girl told her about the baker's door breath and the tin star that kept the room inside it twice, and the gentle manner of the city when it thinks no one is looking. Each detail was accepted and placed carefully on a shelf where it would never be lost. "Will I have to go?" the girl asked at last, not because she feared it, but because naming the horizon is a way to make it faithful. Her grandmother's smile deepened, which is another way to say that the world brightened by a measurable amount. "You will rest," she said, "and then you will wake where warmth is the climate of every day. But you need not hurry. Haste is the thief of tenderness." They lingered. They were silenced together, the way two trees can be silenced together in a field that has not been plowed for a long time. When the match burned low, the girl did not panic as she might have once. She had learned in this very night that light is not a small thing trapped at the end of a stick, but a great thing that agrees to inhabit small places for a while. "Stay," she whispered, and her grandmother's hand remained warm in hers. The flame at her fingers sighed, a last gold breath, then the softest dusk. Yet the light did not leave. It simply changed rooms. Chapter 6. The Light That Never Fades. The old city received the turn of the year the way a deep lake receives a pebble, without splash, but with ripples that reach every quiet shore. Far off, bells counted the hour, and a cheer went up behind doors that were content to keep their secrets. Snow kept falling, its small script writing the softest story on rooftops and rails. In the sheltered corner between the two houses, the girl sat with the bundle of matches in her lap. She watched the night without feeling outside it. She was, for the first time in a long time, not measuring her breath against the cold. She felt as if a door within her had been opened from the inside, and a warmth had stepped through and taken off its cloak. She did a simple thing then, the simplest, truest thing she knew. She laid the matches aside, carefully, respectfully, and folded her hands as if to hold a small bird that did not need holding. She closed her eyes. The world did not vanish. It settled. If one had stood nearby, and no one did, for the city was decently asleep, one might have thought she had begun to listen to a sound you could not hear if you tried too hard. In the listening, The grandmother's hand was there again, not as a flare or a surprise, but as an always. The girl rose, not with feet and knees and the obedient working of muscles, but in the manner of a sigh, preferring a higher window. The alcove, dear and protective, blessed her as she went, and the houses on either side, old companions, straightened their shoulders as if to make a finer arch. The lamplight did not dim. It made itself broader to escort her. Across the air, the stars remembered their lesson from the tree and came a little closer, not changing their places so much as their attention. The snow learned to fall more slowly so that each flake could be examined for its particular genius. The city under all of it, bricks, beams, beams upon bricks, settled into a deeper posture of sleep. There is a kind of waking that does not cancel sleep but perfects it. The girl stepped into that waking the way one steps into a room where someone has kept a chair warm for you. She found herself walking a path the color of candlelight. It curved through a grove where every branch was winter and every leaf was a held note. Underfoot, the ground was soft and certain, like bread on the first morning. She could not say if the path led upward or inward. Perhaps it did both, as the best journeys do. Her grandmother was beside her, and the space on the other side, though empty, was hospitable, like an arm waiting for another arm. They walked without hurry. Wind can threaten in some places. Here it served as a courier for pleasant news. Somewhere nearby, water remembered how to sing. "What is this place?" the girl asked softly. "It is the place the world is trying to be," her grandmother said. "And sometimes it is the place the world really is, if you look with the patient part of your eyes." They came to a door that had no frame and no hinge. On it was written a word the girl did not know how to read and did not need to. The door opened, because that is what doors do when the time for opening arrives. On the other side was not a room, but a warmth that had put on the shape of a room out of courtesy. There was a window, and through it, the sky that had kissed the city 1,000 nights was now close enough to touch. There was a table where a cup of something gentle waited, and the steam from it spelled yes in every language. There was a chair that recognized her immediately. There was a quiet that was not emptiness, but welcome. "Am I home?" the girl asked. "You are always home, where you are wanted," said her grandmother, and the truth of it settled over the girl like a shawl someone had already warmed at the hearth. She sat, she folded her hands and let them be. The cup in front of her was sweet, with the calm that follows faithful labor, with the certainty that morning will come, even if you do not guard the horizon. She drank, and each swallow placed a small stone of peace in the foundation of her heart. Outside the knot window, the stars carried on their good work. They stayed where stars stay, responsible creatures, but they paid attention, and attention is one of the purest gifts we have to give. Far below, or far behind, or perhaps in a parallel room very close by, the city opened its eyes to the new year. Someone kissed a forehead, and someone stirred a pot, and someone, just for a moment, paused at a window and had the feeling that the night was glad to be itself. In the quiet room of warmth, the girl felt no need to count time. Time, for its part, seemed pleased to wait in the hallway, hat in hands, smiling. She did not think of endings, because she had learned a better word. She thought of light, not as something to be hoarded or spent, but as something that moved through us and leaves us brighter. She thought of stoves doing their good work, of trees keeping counsel with stars, of hands finding hands and recognizing them by their warmth. If one had passed the alcove where two houses met, one might have seen a small figure asleep, head bowed, the faintest smile at the corner of the mouth. One might have drawn a blanket of pity around the sight and missed the true blanket, vast, invisible, golden, that had already covered her. But the city was kind. It kept its distance the way kind things do. Snow carried on writing its soft story. The lamplight kept watch as it always had. In the room that was not a room, the grandmother smoothed the girl's hair and placed a kiss where thought meets dream. "Rest," she said, "and when you wake, you will find that the world knows more about love than it did yesterday." The girl closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to deepen her seeing. The last of the night folded itself with care and put itself away. Morning somewhere reached for the latch. And because kindness is cumulative and warmth multiplies and small flames teach great lights how to descend and become human, a new year began with a quiet promise that even in the narrowest streets, between the oldest stones, there would be rooms of light waiting to be noticed. And the light, having learned so many ways to stay, stayed,